Annie Palmer, the White Witch of Rose Hall, is a legend not for the faint of heart. With her cruel ways, many people suffered, and it's believed her spirit still lingers at this property, located in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Hey dissectors, do you ever wonder where urban legends come from? They say there is an element of truth to legends, but how far can that be stretched? Well, today we're going to delve into the dark history of Rose Hall Great House, the legend of the White Witch, and the truth of Annie Palmer. There were said to be over 700 sugar plantations in Jamaica during the 18th century, and only around 15 remain today. The reason for this is the others were burned down during the Great Jamaican Slave Revolt of 1831 to 1832, and Rose Hall survived. Reports state that the property was built in the 1770s and passed through many hands until being inherited by John Rose Palmer. John decided to get married to a lady named Annie Patterson shortly after, and it's Annie whose name has become infamous when you think of Rose Hall. The legend of Annie Palmer states that she was born to an English mother and Irish father. The family decided to move to Haiti when she was 10 years old, and here Annie was placed with a nanny who is said to have taught her voodoo. As the years passed, the young Annie lost both her parents to yellow fever, leaving the girl to be raised by her nanny and ultimately becoming an expert in voodoo. When her nanny died, the 18-year-old ventured to Jamaica to find herself a rich man, which she did when she married John Rose Palmer. But Annie was a woman who got bored very easily, and within just a few months, her eyes started to wander, resting on one of the enslaved working at the plantation. But John got suspicious of his wife's behaviour, and so after following her one night, caught her with her lover. Furious at his wife's betrayal, he beat her severely with a riding crop, leaving Annie wanting revenge. The very next day, John was discovered dead, presumably after being poisoned with his morning coffee. Now, Annie had complete control of the plantation and the many people who sadly worked for her. She ruled with terror, ending the lives of those who displeased her. Anyone who was thinking of running away would be caught in one of the traps that she had positioned around the estate. In the kitchen, she was even tougher. Workers in the kitchen were instructed to always be humming when around food, as a way of making sure they don't steal any of it. If for some reason you were caught not humming, well, the punishment was severe. It was the loss of your head. Due to her reputation for practicing voodoo, the slaves gave her the name the White Witch of Rose Hall. Unsurprisingly, Annie may have been a rich woman, but it seems she wanted more as she married 2 more men for their fortunes, and it didn't end well for them. Her second husband was stabbed in the chest while he slept, and to add insult to injury, had boiling oil poured down his ears just to make sure he was dead. The third husband died by strangulation. Now, this killing Annie didn't do alone, but with the help of her slave lover named Taku. But then an Englishman walked into her life called Robert Rutherford, and it said she fell instantly in love with him. But he had other plans. It seems that Robert was already smitten with the granddaughter of Taku, and so filled with a jealous rage, Annie turned to voodoo. There is an old spell referred to as Old High, which calls a ghost to visit the victim, and after this visitation, the person will slowly start to die. When Taku discovered what Annie had done to his granddaughter, he was seething, and fueled with the rage, he choked the life out of Annie. After this, the slaves dug up a deep hole and buried her body there. They burned all of her worldly belongings, just in case a part of her soul had become attached to them. And a ritual was performed that would keep her spirit trapped in her grave. But alas, something went wrong. Instead, her soul was set free and is said to haunt the house. Many feel that the only reason the house was not burnt down, along with the many other plantations, is that the slaves were afraid that if the house was destroyed, Annie could travel wherever she wanted, and revenge would likely be on her mind. Rumours claim that subsequent owners of Rose Hall have died unexpectedly and often horrifically, leaving people to believe that this is the reason the house stayed deserted for 130 years. Now, the truth of Annie Palmer is very different though. The poor woman was born Annie Mary Patterson and was not brought up in Haiti or even have a voodoo practicing nanny. She married John Rose Palmer in 1820, and together they seem to have lived a pretty quiet, normal life until his death in 1827 of natural causes. Annie never remarried. And what about the mistreatment of her slaves? Well, apparently there are no records of any kind to prove this. In fact, it said there was only a couple of slaves working at the house, and when money got tight and the house went into receivers, There were no slaves at all. After John's death, she managed to get £200 from the estate. When Annie passed away herself in 1846, which is years after her supposed death by strangulation, she left what she had to her goddaughter, Giulia Mary Spence. So what happened to cause this innocent woman to be branded a witch and be accused of such terrible acts? Well, in 1868, a Falmouth newspaper editor published a booklet, and inside this, the story of Rosa Palmer is told, and how she was a white witch and the acts that were said to have been carried out. Now, Rosa had lived at Rose Hall before John Rose Palmer, having married another John Palmer who was related to him. Rosa had been married 4 times, similar to the story, but each husband had died naturally. When Rosa and her husband died due to having no children together, the house went to John's sons who lived in England. They never showed any interest in the property, so the estate kept getting passed down until it reached Palmer's great-nephew, John Rose Palmer. Then in 1911 a book was published about the history of St James, and in this they retold the story but changed the name from Rosa to Annie. Things only got worse for Annie's memory when in 1929 Herbert G. de Lissa wrote a fictional book titled The White Witch of Rose Hall. Based on the story and with the further embellishments in the book, her fate was sealed. So as you can see, the legend had snippets of truth. From Rosa, she was married 4 times, but the rest of the legend is bogus. Changing the name of the witch to Annie as well, what were the odds? I can only imagine how she'd have felt knowing her name has been tarnished with rumours of murder, cruelty and numerous lovers. But just because the witch may not be real, is Rose Hall haunted? Well, many still believe that it is. There have been many reports from people claiming to have seen shadow figures darting from room to room, as well as a woman dressed in a green riding habit riding a black horse around the estate. Others have seen another woman dressed in a white dress standing on the steps of the property, as well as walking by windows at night. People have heard voices screaming from the shadows, running footsteps echoing throughout the house, especially in the cellar area, which nowadays is the gift shop. So what are your thoughts on this supposed haunted location and its legend? It really is scary how something told can be twisted completely out of shape and before long become something unrecognisable. Is this true for all legends? Not necessarily, but there is nothing better than adding some fuel to the fire when you're telling a ghost story to creep out your friends. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and the legend of the White Witch of Rose Hall. Until next time, my friends, stay safe out there.